Venom burst into comics in April of 1988 and quickly became a fan favorite character. He was a concept created by a fan that was sold to Marvel just for $200. And then Todd McFarlane, David Michelinie, and Mike Zeck used this concept as inspiration for the character we know as Venom. However, due to Venom's massive popularity, he's one of those characters that has changed quite a bit since his introduction. And I am willing to bet there are some changes that you really are not aware of, especially since many of those changes came around 2018 and have happened pretty recently. Today I'm going to go into everything you need to know about Venom. I'm going to cover his origin, his stories, his powers and weaknesses, as well as some must-reads I think that will get you introduced to the Venom character and I think are just really great stories. Starting off, Venom is a symbiote that was created by the Dark Elder God Null in a cavern on the planet Clintar. However, Venom's mind has been altered and erased so many times that there are some conflicting accounts. Think kinda like the Joker. But this is the most accepted as well as the most recent one, especially with the events that occurred in the comics. This one makes the most sense. Long ago, this symbiote, who would later become Venom, that's just how I'm going to refer to him for the rest of the video, was a loyal soldier of Null. And at some point, we don't know exactly when, Venom refused to obey Null's will and was therefore cast out of the hive. For a little bit of context, all the symbiotes started out as a hive mind, and this is kind of teased in Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, in the after credit scene where Venom said he had multiversal knowledge and how all the symbiotes shared their knowledge. Once he was cast out, Venom started wandering around the cosmos with no real destination. He was eventually found by some Kree explorers where he bonded with his new host, Tel-Kar, and they went through months of training by the Kree to fight in the ongoing Kree-Skrull War. They were tasked as a deep cover spy, and their duties included like assassination, espionage, and things like that. But with every deep cover spy, they had to break their cover to rescue a ship of Kree refugees. Tel-Kar had to separate himself from Venom and then wiped the symbiote's mind just in case the symbiote was ever captured and it could never give information about Hala, Kree, or Tel-Kar himself. The leader of the refugees was supposed to take Venom back to Hala, but was later abandoned and then sent back drifting through space. One important thing to note is Tel-Kar is not Venom's first host. And I know I'm telling this a little bit out of order, but there is a purpose for it. His first host isn't remembered until much recently, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But his first host was a alien that belonged to an icy planet, and Venom thought he was being a symbiote for a noble warrior and what he thought was a worthy host. But as you could guess, they may have been a little bit less than noble and a lot less than worthy, where with the symbiote, the host committed mass genocide on his planet, and this twisted Venom. Venom is very much in tune and takes on several of his host's emotions, and he's especially susceptible to the negative ones. And he became a lot more aggressive and a lot more predatory and became addicted to rage. Then a little bit later, the alien known as Hazemancer claimed to have captured Venom and started to douse it with chemicals to further amplify its aggression and bloodlust. However, as I stated before, Venom has some memory issues and doesn't really remember all of this. He remembers his first host, but he does not remember his encounter with Hazemancer. Even though Venom went through all of this violence and all this hate, it still wished to bond and protect with his host rather than completely taking them over. And due to this, when the Hive found him drifting through space after the Kree, they imprisoned him as they feared he would contaminate the gene pool. And then this prison would later be incorporated into Battleworld by the Beyonder. And now we get into Secret Wars. And funny enough, the first person who came upon the symbiote on Battleworld is not Spider-Man. It's none other than our favorite merc with a mouth, Deadpool. Deadpool found Venom trapped on Battleworld And after seeing Venom, Deadpool hoped that the symbiote would give his costume a bit of a makeover. I swear I'm not making this up, but I mean, it kind of makes sense in Deadpool fashion, at least. Deadpool did wear the symbiote for a few minutes before realizing that it was alive and was reading his thoughts and trying to bond with him, and it was quickly returned to its prison. However, it is important to note that Venom and Deadpool did not bond in this moment. However, who would bond with it is our very own Spider Man, as we know, who came just moments later and freed Venom from his cell. And when he was freed, he emerged as this black sphere. And then when Spider Man touched it, we get the black and white costume as Venom covered Spider Man's body and became the suit that we know. That is how it originally was until 2018, where it was a black and white costume with a large white spider on the front and back. However, in 2018, with the introduction of Null and much of Venom's backstory being changed, these symbols are actually not spiders, and they're not caused by Spider-Man's costume. They are actually derived from Null's dragon emblems that he has on his chest, just being that he is an offspring and a former worshiper of Null. But when Venom did bond with Spider-Man, he imprinted Spider-Man's power upon itself and is now able to stick to surfaces and create a never-ending supply of organic web fluid. And then continuing on with Secret Wars, towards the end of it, some of the Beyonders wanted to test the worth of the symbiote race. And what they did is they turned several heroes and villains against Spider-Man, claiming that Spider-Man's death would prevent them from erasing every human from the multiverse. Peter was eventually knocked out, and then the symbiote took control of his body. However, when Venom took control, sensing Spider-Man's intention only knocked out the heroes and villains, the Beyonders were impressed, and they decided to let all the humans live. When they got back to Earth after Secret Wars, we get a bit of the journey with Spider-Man and Venom as its suit. Very much as you know from the infamous Spider-Man 3. Venom began to feed off of Peter's desire to be a hero and to help people. Started to take over Peter's body while he slept to go fight crime because he wanted to help as much as he could. And several arcs went by where nothing important really happened. We get a Venom-infused Mysterio, Baron Mordo rewrote reality, and we got Mr. E trying to prematurely free Null. This was an arc that was later inserted in the timeline. It was released just a few years ago. And Venom got really attached to Peter, as he believed he found his perfect host and his, quote, soulmate. He became more and more reluctant to separate himself from Peter, even for short periods of time. But Peter started to grow concerned for his health as he kept waking up exhausted. And he took the symbiote to the Fantastic Four for study. They learned that the black suit wasn't a suit at all, but it was alive and it was sentient, and it wanted to permanently bond with Peter. He was horrified and absolutely rejected Venom. And with the help of Mr. Fantastic and the Human Torch, they learned that the symbiote was weak to both sonic and intense heat. Venom did briefly break out, but then was quickly imprisoned again, and it grew angry that it kept getting rejected and imprisoned. Venom quickly made a plan and took over a tourist and escaped the Baxter building, where he then went to Peter's house and disguised himself as one of Peter's red and blue suits. When Peter needed one of his suits, Venom revealed himself and attempted to forcibly subdue Peter. And now we get the scene that we know from Spider-Man 3, where Spider-Man has to escape to Our Lady of Saints Church and climb up the bell tower. And when the bell tolled on the hour, paired with Spider-Man's rejection of Venom, Venom was weakened and forced to let go of Peter. After some conflict, the continuous sounds of the bell, Venom used whatever strength it had left to escape to the lower levels of the church, where Spider-Man assumed it had perished. That's like the number one mistake you can make as a superhero. Assuming. It's never works out the way you think it does. If it's not on screen or on page, it didn't happen. Due to his constant rejection by Spider-Man, Venom became extremely bitter towards him. And this is an emotion he would share with all of his hosts going forward. Once Venom rested, he found himself being hunted by a trio of bounty hunters and was found and rescued not by Eddie Brock, but by none other than Deadpool. In one night only, we got Venompool, which is honestly as cool as it sounds, if I'm being honest. However, it was very short lived, as I said, only for one night, as the symbiote's rage and bitterness towards Spider Man led to being rejected towards Deadpool. Deadpool returned the symbiote to the church, where then we get the introduction of Eddie Brock. He was recently fired from the Daily Globe after Spider Man debunked his story, exposing the identity of Sin Eater and ruining his career to the point where he could only get work in gossip magazines and just trashy stories. He was disowned by his father and then divorced by his wife, and he went to the church to pray for forgiveness and potentially take his own life. Attracted by their mutual hate for Spider-Man, the symbiote found Eddie Brock, and Eddie's hate for Spider-Man further twisted the symbiote's feelings to more of a fixation of either claiming Spider-Man as his host or killing him. This is also where we get the first mention of the name Venom. This was introduced by Eddie Brock, and when they speak together as for Eddie Brock and Venom, and they speak in the first person plural, we. They then fight Spider-Man on numerous occasions, and even came close to winning several of them, as Venom is stronger than Spider-Man is. However, despite all of this, the symbiote still refers to Eddie as an inferior host and seeks to return to Peter. The symbiote began to manipulate Eddie's memories to give him more reasons to stay bonded with the symbiote whenever he started to question the relationship in the first place. Where the symbiote created characters such as Eddie's sister and his uncle that just never existed. Or the fact that the symbiote made Eddie believe that he had cancer. It's a little fucked up. But it's kind of a norm for the Venom symbiote. During a battle between Spider-Man, Styx, and Stone, the symbiote was seemingly killed by Styx's lethal touch. And when it recovered, it went to go seek out Eddie Brock, who was in prison. And when they escaped prison, they left a little piece of Venom behind, and they quickly found a new host in Eddie's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy, who would become known as Carnage. Spider-Man and Venom had to team up to take down Carnage, as Carnage is way tougher than either of them could handle by themselves. And after they took him down, Spidey and Venom called a truce, and the symbiote and Eddie moved to San Francisco and became the defender of the underground city. The symbiote's ability to reproduce caught the attention of the Life Foundation, and they captured the symbiote and removed it from Eddie. And when captured, they created the symbiotes Riot, Lasher, Phage, Agony, and Scream, who all became hosts to hired private military contractors who were hired at the Life Foundation. This is where the movie Venom 1 took much of its inspiration. If you remove the Spider-Man bit, this is somewhat accurate if you change the origins of the Venom symbiote. Once Venom found Eddie again, Eddie began to notice negative influences on himself that the symbiote was leaving upon him, namely the symbiote's bloodlust. And the symbiote was rejected yet again, but this time by Eddie. And in an act of despair, it let out a psychic screech, which accidentally alerted the Hive of Earth. If you've seen Zack Snyder's Justice League, exactly like the opening scene of that, which probably this story was the inspiration for it, because it is near identical. The symbiote did seek out Eddie, and kind of out of act of necessity, Venom, Spider-Man, and the Scarlet Spider drove the symbiote invasion back. And then the symbiote let out another sonic scream, causing many of the invading symbiotes to perish. After the invasion, the symbiote's bloodlust only grew and began to force Eddie to satiate its appetite for flesh, and even abandon Eddie when he refused to do so. At one point, even the symbiote tried to devour Eddie, and this is where they found out that chocolate did curb some of their cravings. Again, the Venom movies picked up inspiration from here. Eddie did his best to resist the urges, but they were powerful. and he began to distrust and fear the symbiote and its influence over him. Part of what attributed to its growing bloodlust was a bit of the Carnage symbiote that was still inside of Venom that was trying to take over. And sensing that a new Carnage symbiote was being born, Venom coached the symbiote through before he was being born, and this would be a new symbiote called Toxin. And as with all of its past hosts, Eddie was unable to continue with the symbiote after he had a Christian awakening. And the symbiote was sold in an underground auction, more like a black market sale, by Eddie to try to make some money to help repair the things he has done. And the symbiote was bought by Magia Don Vicente Fortunato, who gave it to his son Angelo. Angelo was Venom very briefly, but in that time he did learn Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and after a failed assassination attempt, the symbiote deemed him unworthy and then approached the Scorpion and took him as his new host. Venom offered Gargan new powers in exchange for killing Spider-Man, but even with these new powers and abilities, he was quickly defeated by Spider-Man. At one point, Venom did sense his new host was nearby and tricked Gargan into following him. And as soon as he could, the symbiote tried to abandon Gargan for Eddie. However, at this point, because Eddie did actually have cancer, Eddie was cured of cancer by Martin Lee, the Negative Man. And due to a side effect of Lee's powers, the remaining Venom symbiote in Eddie's system was converted into Anti-Venom, a mindless symbiote, and Venom and Gargan barely managed to escape. Keep in mind, and keep this in memory, that all the hosts have a little bit of the symbiote left in them once the host and Venom part. That will be important later on. And then afterwards, Gargan joined the Dark Avengers, but when they were defeated, the US military took the symbiote into custody. And now we get into one of my favorite comic runs of Venom is Agent Venom. So the military established Project Rebirth, which is an attempt to weaponize the symbiote, and it's based on an earlier program called the Sim Soldier program. And after some study, they found out that the symbiote, if it was removed within 48 hours of first contact with the host, it is much easier to remove. And, of course, being the US military, they're going to weaponize it, and they're going to assign it. And it was assigned to Colonel Eugene Thompson, or otherwise known as Flash Thompson. And while wearing it, Flash was able to create prosthetic legs and even gain spider-like powers. The suit formed this body armor looking image, and it honestly looked pretty cool. I liked it a lot. Flash really enjoyed being bonded with Venom because he was, for one, able to walk again, and two, he was able to emulate his favorite superhero, Spider-Man. One thing that the military did do to help keep the symbiote from going out of control is it was dosed with symbiote suppressant drugs, which the goal of it was to lobotomize it. However, the drug was imperfect, and oftentimes the symbiote took advantage of Flash's anger issues to seize control and go into a monstrous form and go into a frenzy. Flash was later dispatched to go capture Eddie Brock so they could use the anti-venom to help cure the spider virus during the Spider Island event. But as before with Scorpion, the symbiote abandoned Flash for Eddie. But Eddie despised the Venom symbiote, and when he was being taken over, shed tears as the symbiote covered his body once again. This was very short-lived, though, as Flash convinced the symbiote to come back with him as Eddie would constantly fight its control. Moving forward during the Superior Spider-Man arc, and this is where Otto Octavius currently has control of Spider-Man's body, Flash was attacked by Spider-Man, and after briefly escaping Otto, where he went to hide with Peter Parker, someone he knew in high school, and they were friends. But Flash, not knowing that Peter's actually Otto, was later captured. And Otto forced the symbiote to bond with him, creating Superior Venom. And Otto became even more vicious and aggressive when bonded with the symbiote. The symbiote sensed something was off with his former host and was consistently undermining Otto to the point where he eventually took him over. And it took Flash in an Iron Man suit, as well as the remnants of Peter Parker's psyche, to expel the Venom symbiote, who returned to Flash. And this is where we learned, well, the characters in the universe learned that something is very wrong with Spider-Man. Back with Flash, Agent Venom went a bit on a journey, and this is where Venom comics got a little bit more out there. So Venom was a member of the Thunderbolts, which is fantastic. But Captain America asked Agent Venom to take Iron Man's spot as the liaison for the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now instead of Agent Venom, we get Agent of the Cosmos, which does have a pretty cool suit design, but personally, not a huge fan of this run. Being in space, the other symbiotes in the Hive reached out and tried to reconnect with the symbiote, causing Flash to lose control of the symbiote, and it went berserk. It took the might of all of the Guardians of the Galaxy to cleanse the symbiote of all of its bloodlust and to calm it down. But after they did, it gained a new ability to hear the voices of the cosmos, helping guide Venom and Flash to whoever needed help. However, as quickly as it was cleansed, it was quickly corrupted just as fast, as it briefly bonded with the Gramosian space pirate leader, Mercurio. But after being beat again by Flash and the Guardians of the Galaxy, the symbiote was then going to be taken to its homeworld Clintar to be re-cleansed. However, on the way to Clintar, the other agents of the cosmos found them and put Venom up for trial for everything it has done. However, due to the testimony of Flash, the symbiote was returned to the custody of Flash and then returned to Earth. Upon Earth, as they returned, Flash and Venom were captured and separated by Spider-Man, despite them protesting that they do not want to fight and were very adamant about it. Venom used one of its new powers to take on a humanoid form without a host. This is something that Venom's able to do when it was recently cleansed. And this caught Peter by surprise, and he was quickly overwhelmed. Spider-Man tried to lead the symbiote away by saying how they were old friends and he was an old host, which, surprisingly, the symbiote did not remember. The symbiote once again bonded with Peter, but this time not to take over, but instead show memories to Peter of its birth and of the first host that I mentioned earlier in this video, that the Purge cleansed all of its memories except for its first host. The symbiote, being bonded with Peter again, sensed his hatred towards Venom. Surprisingly, Venom genuinely apologized, saying it was no longer who it was in the past that Peter knew and hated. The symbiote then released Peter. The symbiote went back to Flash, and Flash filled in the rest of the gaps. Sometime later, the FBI hunted down Flash and attacked him with anti-symbiote weaponry, where the symbiote and Flash were separated. The symbiote reverted to a feral state. Even in this feral state, the symbiote decided not to return to Flash, as it enjoyed being bloodthirsty and angry. And he found a new host in Army Ranger Lee Price, who, due to his training as an Army Ranger, was able to resist Venom's influence quite well. And the FBI quickly found out who the new host was and gave him a deal. More like blackmail, but we'll call it a deal. They could either be an informant for the FBI or they revealed their identity to the public. However, when the FBI's plan fell through, Eddie Brock and his anti-symbiote task force were sent out to capture Venom. They were ultimately successful with the help of Spider-Man, and the symbiote was taken into the FBI's hands. But before they could take its alpha flight, Eddie broke the symbiote out of containment and wanted to bond with Venom. He was determined that this time their relationship would be different than the time they were first bonded. And knowing that the symbiote was in a corrupted state, Eddie sought the help of Alchemax, where he learned that his body has been rendered inhospitable to the symbiotes due to being saturated with the symbiote suppressant drugs when he was in the FBI. Alchemax decided to help Eddie as long as he brought Sturgeon to them along with all the equipment that was stolen. And so, Eddie's body was now able to be a host for a symbiote once more. And with this, Eddie and Venom became the lethal protector. The symbiote felt good to be a hero again after the recent cleansing. However, being bonded with the symbiote again did take its toll on Eddie's body, causing him to sleep longer. With the effects of the cleansing ending, the symbiote started to remember its past and sought redemption for what it has done throughout the years. After some time of doing good, the Alchemax cure started to wear off and Venom became more aggressive and more feral again. And being fed up, Eddie returned to Alchemax and demanded an explanation. After a bit of an argument, and after a fight broke out, and a vat full of serum derived from the anti-venom symbiote was knocked over, and Flash was covered in an artificial replica of the anti-venom symbiote. And because of that, Eddie's metabolism was stabilized. And Spider-Man briefly captured the symbiote, and then it broke free and rebonded with Eddie again. You sense the trend. They're not going to keep them apart for very long. Sometime later, the symbiote began to suffer nightmares as an ancient and powerful evil deity who we know as Null, but that's not quite known to the characters yet, or I guess even to the reader, that the symbiote had worshipped in the past. As Null's influence intensified, the symbiote was afflicted with intense bouts of bloodlust and insanity. Eddie tried to suppress them with the antipsychosis medication and tried to stay out of combat in fear that he was going to hurt people around him. Venom went berserk and killed several people and was eventually subdued by Rex Strickland, a former member of the symbiote-enhanced super soldiers team. Venom soon regained composure of himself, and Venom, Eddie, and Rex now sought to free Rex's old comrades from Null's control. However, as they tried to help, a giant symbiote dragon came down and devoured all the super soldier symbiotes. And with the help of Miles Morales, Venom managed to take down the symbiote dragon. But then at this moment, Null manifested. And at the sight of his manifestation, Venom immediately submitted himself to him completely. However, Eddie's rage over Null killing innocents sent him into a berserk rage. And very quickly, in a show of strength, Null stripped Venom from Eddie and reconnected Venom to the Hive, causing Venom's eyes to briefly turn red. Venom briefly returned to Eddie with newfound powers and knowledge due to it being briefly connected to the Hive again, as well as being connected to Null. And Venom revealed to Eddie that Rex was the last piece of the symbiote dragon that they needed for it to be complete. Venom and Rex's symbiote merged with Eddie. Rex's symbiote is, fun fact, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is kind of cool. And together, they were powerful enough to fight Null. But despite being armed with many high-powered weapons, both symbiotes were taken from Eddie and they were absorbed by the dragon, whose name is Grendel. Due to their intense feelings, both symbiotes were wrested from the control of Grendel, and the Tyrannosaurus symbiote sacrificed itself to drag Null's avatar into a blast furnace. And Eddie was sadly in the crossfire. Venom did all he could to protect Eddie and ended up sacrificing himself so Eddie could live, but not before Venom could tell Eddie that he loved him. Well, the Tyrannosaurus symbiote did perish. Venom seemingly perished. Like I said, it's comics. The symbiote survived and it found Eddie, who had been captured by Project Oversight. The symbiote pretended to be brain dead and began suppressing memories that would deem harmful to Eddie, such as Flash's death, the fact that Eddie had a son, and the Makers. And the Maker is an evil Reed Richards. And the Maker's repeated attempts to interrogate him. The Maker revealed that he had extracted a codex, trace remnants of symbiote biomass left in former hosts. Told you it'd be important again. And the Maker planned to get more from Flash's corpse and absolutely mutilate Flash's corpse. This caused the symbiote to go berserk, and he separated from Eddie in order to restrain the Maker, and he absorbed Flash's codex. When he did absorb Flash's codex and then rebonded with Eddie, they took the form of Agent Venom once again due to that and were a bit stronger. However, over time, the codex did burn out, and Eddie rejected Venom once again because he found out the symbiote has been altering his memories, and the symbiote was left hostless once again. And then here, there were several arcs that happened afterwards. None of them were super impactful on the Venom story, and they were a bit less grounded, a bit out there. There was the War of the Realms event where the symbiote went to go help the heroes, and there were a couple of heroes it did take over as hosts. I think at one point, almost every character even became a host. Thor was, Hulk, it was a lot. And then back on Earth, there was Absolute Carnage, Null's second appearance. And then nothing major happened for the character besides them becoming the new god of the symbiotes, King in Black. Which I know sounds major, but that's a video for another day. The symbiote's powers are quite extensive, and they gain more depending on the writer and also as they gain new hosts. But starting off with his innate powers, it is able to freely manipulate and extend itself even without a host. I mean, like giant tendrils and able to just cover large spaces. And as I said before, after being cleansed and without a host, it is able to take a humanoid form. And it's often with a fanged mouth and large white eye spots that we know. But when bonded with a host, it can shapeshift to mimic and match its surroundings, rendering it nearly invisible if it chooses to. And the symbiote can augment all of its host's physical abilities to superhuman levels, and in some cases, greater than. As I said before, I mean, the symbiote can copy the powers and abilities of other living beings by interfacing with them. As I said before, it can take the abilities of those that it bonded with, and as you know, some of the abilities it taken from Spider-Man is the ability to crawl on walls, one of the things Peter was able to do is use the Venom symbiote as storage, where he was able to put his camera and film inside the Venom symbiote, and later Flash used it to store munitions. And it can now generate web. But also a side effect of being bonded with Spider-Man is that it's now immune to Spider-Man's spider sense. When Eddie was bonded with it, it could lift up to 11 tons, making him stronger than Spider-Man. However, his strength does fluctuate a little bit, being just slightly stronger than Spider-Man to being much stronger than Spider-Man. Venom is incredibly resistant to physical injury and can withstand high caliber bullets and even absorb smaller ones. It has superhuman stamina where they're able to survive in harsh environments for a long period of time, such as in toxic gas or even underwater. The symbiote can also filter breathable air to its host, especially when they're underwater in toxic gas. And they also have a healing factor that can heal pretty much any injury or disease. However, it cannot heal cancer. And Venom has a genetic memory, making it able to take information and memories from things it touches. And Venom is able to alter body chemistry, as it did to help gaslight Eddie Brock. It can communicate telepathically with its host and other symbiotes. And the fangs that it has aren't just for show, but are actually extremely poisonous. A bite was even enough to cripple Sandman, leaving him unable to reform himself, and he almost perished. The symbiote's also able to create all manners of weaponry, gadgets, and pretty much anything you can think or that it sees to copy. It's even grown extremely large wings to fly. However, it does have some pretty large weaknesses. It is extremely sensitive to sound and thermal attacks, and it takes on the negative emotions of its host, which can cause it to go feral or berserk. And the anti-venom serum and the anti-venom symbiote are extremely toxic and can destroy it. Personally, I think Venom is a really fun character. I go back and forth if I like him more as a hero, anti-hero, or villain, just because some of the arcs he's in are just so well done, and just depending on the writer, it goes back and forth. I think a lot of the stories have become repetitive, but I'm a fan of Venom. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I am a fan of Venom because of it. I love the King in Black story. Venom is one of those characters that I think has like been a bright spot in comics, considering that comics has been they haven't been doing as well recently. King in Black storyline and the recent additions to Venom's story, I think, really helped. And I know the Venom movies helped as well, even if my personal opinions of them, I'm not a huge fan, but they have helped with the general public, and for that, I'm all for it. If you do want to get into the Venom comics, some reads I do suggest are The Amazing Spider-Man number 300, where it's Venom's first full appearance, as well as Venom's Lethal Protector run and The King in Black. I think all these stories showcase different parts of Venom, and King in Black gives us more of a backstory. It gives us the Venom that we know today, whereas Lethal Protector is it's fun. I think it's just a fun story where Venom tries to do good. Let me know in the comments what you think about Venom. If you enjoyed this video, go check out our review for Venom The Last Dance. We have some thoughts about it, especially as being big Venom fans as we are. There are definitely some thoughts. Go check it out, and thank you guys so much for watching.